Don't just listen tonight. Transform. The inner circle is where that happens. First link in the description. Welcome back, fellow Jungians, to Jung at Night. Tonight, we're entering one of the most tender, most necessary spaces in the human heart. The place where self-love, letting go, and the long journey home to yourself all meet. The question that lives quietly in so many of us, especially in the late hours when the noise of the day finally goes still. Why is it so easy to love everyone else and so impossibly hard to love myself? But before we begin, let me remind you of something important. You're not here to take notes. You're not here to solve anything tonight. You're here to rest. To let Jung's wisdom on self-love, letting go, and coming home to yourself dissolve into your unconscious while you drift into the peace you've been searching for. So go ahead, let your body sink deeper into the bed. Feel the weight of your head against the pillow. Notice your breathing slowing, your muscles releasing the tension they've been holding all day. There's nothing you need to fix right now, nothing you need to become tonight. You are simply here, listening, letting go. I must mention a word for those of you who are ready for more than tonight. Inside the inner circle, members are breaking patterns they carried for decades, waking up differently, finally accessing the self-love they stopped believing was possible. Daily prompts, deep meditations, a community of people doing this exact work alongside you. If that is what you came here for, the link is in the description. Now let us begin. As we move through the psychology of self-abandonment, the patterns of giving too much, the art of genuine letting go, and the quiet, extraordinary journey of coming home to who you truly are. Just let it wash over you, like a gentle tide, carrying away what no longer serves you. You don't have to remember any of this. Your soul already knows the way home. Jung believed that true transformation happens not through effort, but through awareness, meeting surrender. And tonight, that's exactly what we're offering you. Awareness wrapped in rest, healing woven into sleep. So close your eyes if they're not already closed. Let the world outside fade to nothing. And let me ask you something that might change everything. Have you ever felt this? You pour your heart, your time, your energy, sometimes your entire sense of self into other people, into relationships, into roles, into the endless work of being who everyone around you needs you to be. And somewhere in all of that giving, you lose the thread back to yourself. You can no longer remember what you actually want, what genuinely brings you alive, what it feels like to be in your own company without immediately filling the space with something, anything, that keeps you from having to face the particular quiet of being alone with yourself. Carl Jung pointed out something that few people dare to say directly. The inability to love yourself is not a character flaw. It is a wound. A wound that was formed early, in rooms you may not remember clearly, in the accumulated experience of learning that your worth was something to be earned rather than something you simply had. And from that wound, a particular way of moving through the world developed, always giving more than you receive, always accommodating more than you ask to be accommodated, always finding it easier to meet everyone else's needs than to acknowledge your own, and calling all of that love, when very often it is something else entirely. It is the wound wearing love's clothing. In today's video, we will explore why when you truly love yourself, not in words, but in the quiet daily practice of staying with yourself, everything changes. The relationships you enter, the ones you leave, the way you hold your own grief, the way you let go of what was never truly yours to keep, and the extraordinary experience of coming home to a self that has been waiting with more patience than you can imagine for exactly this moment. Stay until the end. Because the love you've been searching for has never been as far away as it seemed. It has been here all along, waiting for you to turn toward it. Number 1. Why you give so much and still feel so empty. You think you're loving, and in many ways you are. But look more closely at what the loving costs you. How many times have you said yes when every part of you wanted to say no? How many times have you swallowed what you actually felt to keep the peace? How many times have you made yourself smaller, quieter, less inconvenient, less needy, less real, in order to maintain a connection that required you to be a more manageable version of yourself? And how many times, after all of that giving, after all of that accommodating and adjusting and making yourself fit, have you still felt empty, still felt unseen, still felt like something essential was missing, even though you were doing everything right? That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern, and it has a very specific psychological explanation. Carl Jung said that you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are in the depths of your unconscious, where fears, buried wounds, and the beliefs you absorbed before you had the language to question them are still quietly running the show. And one of the most powerful of those buried beliefs, the one that underlies the pattern of giving too much and receiving too little, sounds something like this: I am not enough to be loved as I actually am. I have to earn it. I have to be useful enough, good enough, available enough, easy enough. And if I ask for too much, or show too much, or need too much, the love will go away. That belief was not chosen. It was formed in the specific emotional climate of your earliest rooms. In the particular way love was given, and sometimes withdrawn in the relationships that shaped you before you had any say in what they were teaching you. And from that belief, a whole way of being in the world developed. The way of the person who gives more than they receive, who is always the one who tries harder, who is always the one who loves more, who has learned, through 1,000 small experiences, that their needs are inconvenient and their worth is conditional, and the safest thing is to keep making themselves useful so the love does not disappear. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Sarah. She was someone everyone described as warm, generous, endlessly available. If you needed anything, Sarah was there. She remembered birthdays, showed up in crises, held space for everyone's grief. She was, by any external measure, one of the most loving people anyone knew. But late at night, in the quiet after everyone had gone home and the roles had been set aside, she felt a particular kind of empty that she could never quite name. Not sad exactly, not lonely in any obvious way. Just hollow, like a house that everyone came to and no one lived in. She gave and gave and gave and still felt somehow unseen, still felt like the most essential part of her had never quite been in the room. When Sarah began doing genuine interior work, she discovered something that surprised her. She was not giving from abundance. She was giving from fear, not consciously, not deliberately, but from the deep, largely unconscious belief that if she stopped being useful, if she stopped being the one who showed up and held things together and asked for nothing in return, the love would disappear. Because that was what the earliest rooms had taught her. That love was transactional, that it flowed toward you when you were performing the right version of yourself and withdrew when you were not. And so she had spent her entire adult life in a kind of continuous performance, generous, warm, endlessly available, and profoundly, invisibly alone. Jung called this identification with the wound. When you haven't separated your true self from the part of you that's been hurt, instead of healing it, you seek someone to carry it for you, to love you enough to make you forget your insecurities. But no one can do that. And so you keep being disappointed, you keep hurting, you keep giving more, hoping that if you give enough, something will finally fill the place inside that has always felt like not enough. The cruel paradox is that the more you give from that place of lack, the more empty you feel, because giving from lack is not love, it is bargaining. You are not truly offering yourself. You are offering a performance of yourself in exchange for the reassurance that you are acceptable, that you are enough, that the love will stay. And every time that reassurance comes, it lasts only a moment before the hollow feeling returns. Because reassurance from the outside can never reach the place inside where the wound actually lives. If you recognize yourself in Sarah's story, If you have ever given so much that you lost yourself somewhere in the giving, leave a comment below to let me know that what I'm saying has touched you, because you are not alone in this. And the fact that you are here, listening, at whatever hour this is for you, tells me that something in you is already beginning to understand that the giving has to start with yourself, not instead of others, but before. Always before. Real self-love is not selfish. It is the foundation, the ground beneath everything else. Without it, every relationship you enter is a reaching, a searching, a hoping that this time the other person will finally give you what you have never quite learned to give yourself. And that searching will go on, in different relationships, with different people, in different circumstances, until the day you finally turn toward the interior, toward the wound, toward the self that has been waiting, and begin, for the first time, to love it as it actually is, rather than as it would need to be in order to deserve love. That is where the journey begins. Not with the perfect relationship, not with the perfect version of yourself, but with the willingness to stay, to be here, with what is actually present, with the full and complicated and genuinely worthwhile reality of who you are, right now, exactly as you are, without needing to earn it, without needing to be better first. You are already enough. And tonight, slowly, we are going to begin to feel what that actually means. Number 2, the mask you wore to survive and what it cost you. Once you begin to understand that the emptiness is not about finding the right person, or giving more, or trying harder, a deeper question begins to form. If this pattern is not about love exactly, then what is it about? What is actually operating underneath the giving and the accommodating and the endless making yourself acceptable? Carl Jung had a very precise answer to that question, and it is one of the most important ideas in all of his work. He called it the persona. The persona is the social mask that every human being builds in order to function in the world, to be accepted, to be safe, to be loved. It is not bad. It is necessary. Without some version of it, we could not navigate the social world at all. The problem arises not when you have a persona, but when you forget you are wearing one. When the mask becomes so familiar, so automatic, so thoroughly integrated into the way you move through every room, that you can no longer feel the difference between the performance and the reality. When the face beneath the mask becomes inaccessible even to yourself. For most people who carry the wound of self-abandonment, the persona was built around a very specific requirement. Be acceptable, be lovable, be the version of yourself that keeps the warmth coming and the withdrawal at bay. And so every quality that felt unacceptable, every need that felt too demanding, every feeling that felt too big or too dark or too inconvenient, went into the shadow, into the part of the self that the persona could not accommodate, and the persona itself became increasingly polished, increasingly competent, increasingly the version of you that everyone around you found easiest to love. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Claire. She was 43 when she first really understood what she had been doing for most of her adult life. From the outside, her life looked full. A career she was respected in, relationships that functioned, a reputation for being warm and reliable, and the kind of person others came to in hard times. She was, as she described it, very good at being fine, at taking whatever was happening in the interior and presenting it to the world in a form that was acceptable, manageable, not too much. But one evening, sitting alone in her apartment, after a long day of being exactly who everyone needed her to be, she felt something she had not expected. Not sadness exactly, something stranger than that. A kind of exhaustion so complete that it went beyond the body. The exhaustion of a person who has been performing for so long that she can no longer remember what it would feel like to simply be without the performance, without the monitoring, without the constant subtle adjustment of herself to the shape of whatever the room required. She described it later as the feeling of meeting a stranger in the mirror. The person looking back was recognizable. She knew her. But she did not know her the way you know someone who has been genuinely present with you. She knew her the way you know a very convincing performance. And the question that arose in that moment, quiet and strange and more important than anything she had thought about in years, was this: who is actually in here? Behind the competence and the warmth and the endless fine, who is the person that all of this was built to protect? Jung wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself, as well as others, think one is." This is not a criticism, it is an observation. The persona is not false, exactly. But it is partial. It is the curated version, the acceptable version, the version that learned, through the specific pressures of your specific life, which qualities were safe to show and which ones needed to stay hidden. And when you live entirely inside that curated version for long enough, the parts that stayed hidden do not disappear. They accumulate in the shadow, growing quieter but not smaller, growing less visible but not less present. And eventually they begin to speak, not loudly, through the hollow feeling, through the exhaustion that sleep cannot reach, through the sense that even in your fullest moments, something essential is missing. If you have ever looked in the mirror and felt a distance between the person looking back and the person you know yourself to actually be, leave a comment below, even just a word, even just a single sign that you recognize what is being described here, because that recognition, that moment of seeing the persona for what it is the beginning of everything. The first crack in the wall through which the genuine self can begin, slowly and carefully, to breathe. And once you begin to see the persona clearly, once you understand what it has been protecting and what it has been costing, a natural next question arises. What do I do with the parts that went into the shadow? What do I do with the needs and the feelings and the genuine unedited interior that the persona has been keeping hidden? This is where the work gets both more difficult and more genuinely alive. Because what is in the shadow is not only what is dark, it is also what is most originally yours. If tonight is opening something in you that you do not want to close again, the inner circle is where it continues. Every morning, a new prompt waiting for you. Every week, new meditations going deeper than anything on this channel. People who have been where you are right now and who kept going. The link is in the description. Number 3. The parts of you that went into the shadow and why they matter. Here is something that Jung understood better than almost anyone else who has ever studied the human mind. The shadow is not primarily dark. That is the most common misunderstanding of this idea, and it is worth correcting directly. The shadow is simply everything that was not allowed. Everything that was too much, or too little, or too strange, or too needy, or too intense for the particular emotional container of your early life. And that includes qualities that are genuinely difficult: anger, jealousy, neediness, the capacity for cruelty that every human being carries somewhere in the interior. But it also includes, and this is the part that surprises most people, qualities that are genuinely wonderful: creativity that was dismissed as impractical, ambition that was labeled as unseemly, sensitivity that was called weakness, joy that was too loud, wildness that did not fit, desire that felt dangerous to acknowledge. When you gave all of that to the shadow in order to maintain the persona, you did not lose it. You simply lost access to it. And the giving too much that leaves you feeling empty, the performance of the warm and reliable and endlessly available version of yourself, is in many ways the cost of that lost access. Because the genuine self, the full and unedited and completely real version of you, is not available. It went into the shadow, and what remains to give to the world is the performance. And performances, however polished, however genuinely caring, always feel hollow from the inside, because the person giving them knows, somewhere beneath the performance, that the most real part of themselves was not invited into the room. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Amy. She grew up in a family where emotional expression was considered weakness, not explicitly, No one ever said feelings are bad. But the message was communicated through the texture of everyday life, the way her mother's face closed when Amy cried, the way her father redirected intense emotion into problem-solving before it had been allowed to simply be felt, the way the atmosphere of the house changed when something uncomfortable surfaced, becoming tight and slightly dangerous in a way that everyone felt and no one named. Amy learned early that the feelings that were too big needed to go somewhere quiet, and so they did. They went into the shadow. As an adult, Amy was known for her calm, her steadiness under pressure, her ability to handle hard things without falling apart. People relied on her for this. They found it reassuring. But in the interior, underneath the steadiness, there was a pressure that had been building for decades, all of the feelings that had never been allowed to simply exist. All of the grief and the anger and the longing and the fear that had been redirected and managed and made quiet for so many years. They were there. They had always been there. They were simply not visible. And then one ordinary afternoon, sitting in a meeting at work where nothing particularly significant was happening, Amy felt something she did not expect. A wave of emotion so complete and so sudden that she had to leave the room to let it pass. She stood in a corridor and cried in a way she had not cried since she was a child. Not about the meeting, not about anything she could name, just the weight of everything that had been waiting, everything the shadow had been holding. Finally, in this completely ordinary moment, insisting on being felt, Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Amy's shadow had been directing her life for decades, through the chronic fatigue that had no clear medical explanation, through the flatness that followed even her best achievements, through the sense that she was always slightly performing herself rather than actually being herself. And in that corridor, crying for reasons she could not immediately explain, the unconscious was finally becoming conscious. The shadow was finally finding a way to the surface, not to destroy her, to free her. The shadow becomes dangerous, not when it is seen, but when it is denied. When the parts of yourself that went into it are kept in the dark indefinitely, they do not stay still. They influence. They leak into the life through the patterns you cannot explain, through the reactions that feel disproportionate, through the attractions that keep leading you to the same kind of person, through the hollowness that follows even your most genuine moments of giving. The shadow keeps speaking. And the way it speaks, when direct expression is not available, is through exactly these symptoms: the emptiness, the exhaustion, the sense that something real is always just out of reach. Bringing the shadow into the light does not mean acting on everything that is in it. It does not mean expressing everything that was suppressed or becoming a person without filters or form. It means acknowledging, seeing what is there, saying to the anger, "I know you are here," to the grief, "I know you are here," to the desire and the wildness and the need and the fear, "I know you are here, you are mine. I am not afraid of you." And in that acknowledgement, something releases. The energy that was being used to keep the shadow contained becomes available for actual living. And the genuine self, the full and complicated and completely real version of you that includes everything the shadow has been holding, begins to have a little more room to breathe. If you feel that there are parts of you living in the shadow, parts that were too much or not enough, or simply not welcome in the rooms you grew up in, leave a word in the comments. One word that represents something in you that has been waiting to be seen. Because sometimes the most important thing is simply to acknowledge that it is there, that it belongs to you, that you have not forgotten it, even though you have been asked to act as if you have. And once you begin to see what is in the shadow, once you begin to acknowledge the parts of yourself that went into the dark, something else becomes possible. Something that most people who have spent years giving too much and receiving too little have almost stopped believing in. The possibility of genuine self-love, not the performed version, not the affirmations repeated in the mirror, but the real kind. the kind that changes everything from the inside, the kind that Jung considered the most important and most difficult work of a human life. And it is where this journey goes next. Number 4. What self-love actually is and what it is not. Most people, when they hear the words self-love, imagine something soft and uncomplicated. Bubble baths, saying no to things, treating yourself. The kind of self-care that is easy to understand and pleasant to practice, but that does not actually reach the place inside where the wound lives. That version of self-love is not wrong. It is simply incomplete. It is the surface of something that goes much deeper. And if you have been practicing the surface version for years and still feel the hollow feeling, still feel the empty after all the giving, still feel the sense that something essential is missing, it is because the real version of self-love has not yet been reached. The real version is more demanding and more liberating and more genuinely transformative than anything that can be purchased or scheduled. Carl Jung never used the phrase self-love in the way it is commonly used today. But the concept he kept returning to throughout his entire body of work was individuation. The process of becoming genuinely, fully, irreducibly yourself. Not the version shaped by fear. Not the version formed by the wound. Not the managed, adjusted, carefully acceptable version that the persona presents to the world. But the real self, the original nature. The full and complicated and worthwhile human being that arrived before any of the shaping began and that has been waiting in the interior through all the years of the performance for permission to live. Individuation is what real self-love actually is. It is the ongoing, daily, never quite finished practice of returning to the real self, of choosing the genuine response over the acceptable one, of allowing the actual interior to be present rather than the edited version, of treating your own needs, your own feelings, your own genuine responses to the world as information worth attending to rather than inconveniences to be managed before anyone notices them. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Dana. She had spent most of her adult life practicing the surface version of self-love. She knew all the language. She could tell you about boundaries and self-care and the importance of not giving from an empty cup, but she was still, underneath all of that awareness, giving from an empty cup, still saying yes when she meant no, still monitoring how she was landing in every room she entered, still feeling the hollow feeling after every interaction that required her to be the warm and reliable and endlessly available version of herself. The shift for Dana came not through a new practice or a new framework, but through a single, very small, very ordinary moment. She was in a conversation with a friend who was complaining about something that Dana privately found petty and exhausting. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, instead of generating the warm and patient response that the persona had always produced automatically, she paused. And in that pause, she noticed what was actually present in her interior: a mild irritation, a tiredness, a wish to be somewhere else. And instead of immediately managing those responses into something more acceptable, she allowed herself to simply feel them, privately, without acting on them externally, but genuinely, without the management. It was a tiny moment, invisible from the outside, but from the inside, it felt like the first, genuinely honest thing she had done in years. The first moment the real self had been in the room rather than the performance of it, and from that moment, something shifted, not dramatically, but in the way that real things shift, gradually and from the inside, and in a direction that does not announce itself but that changes everything over time. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and this is what real self-love actually is, not the bath, not the boundary, not the affirmation, but the privilege of allowing the genuine self to be present in the ordinary moments of an ordinary life, the privilege of noticing what you actually feel before converting it into something more manageable." The privilege of attending to your own interior with the same quality of care and curiosity that you have been giving so freely to everyone else. It sounds simple. It is one of the hardest things a human being can actually do, because it requires something that the wound made dangerous a very long time ago: presence. Genuine, unedited, unmanaged presence in your own interior, staying with what is actually there, rather than immediately reaching for something better. Being honest about the irritation and the tiredness and the wish to be somewhere else, rather than generating the acceptable response that keeps everyone comfortable and leaves you hollow. That honesty, practiced in the small moments, day after day, in the ordinary texture of an ordinary life, is what real self-love actually is, and it is what changes everything. Not because it makes you more lovable to others, but because it makes you genuinely present to yourself. And genuine presence in your own interior is the only thing that can ever actually fill the hollow place that all the giving was always trying and always failing to reach. If this resonates with you, if somewhere in these words you are recognizing the difference between the version of self-love you have been practicing and the version Jung is pointing toward, leave a comment below. It can be anything: a feeling, a word, a recognition, because sometimes just naming the recognition is enough to let it begin to do its work. And as this work of genuine self-love begins, as the real self starts to have a little more room in the ordinary moments of your daily life, something else becomes possible. Something that most people think of as loss, but that Jung understood as liberation. The ability to let go, not because you have stopped caring, but because you have cared enough for yourself to finally release what was never truly yours to carry. This is where the journey takes us next, into the territory of genuine letting go, and what it actually means to release what you have been holding long past the time it was yours to hold. Let your breathing slow a little more now. Let each exhale carry something with it, some small piece of the tension that has been sitting in the body since before you even noticed it was there. You don't have to know what it is. You don't have to name it or understand it or do anything with it at all. Just let it go with the breath, out and away, into the dark, into the quiet that is beginning to deepen around you as this night settles into itself. You are safe here. You are held here. And what we are moving into now is the territory that most people spend their entire lives circling around but never quite entering. The territory of genuine letting go. Not the kind you perform when you want to seem like someone who has healed, but the real kind. The kind that happens in the interior, in the quiet, in the place where the holding has been happening all this time without your full conscious awareness of it. Because you have been holding a great deal, more than you probably realize. And not just the obvious things, not just the relationships that ended badly, or the losses that were clearly marked as losses, but the subtler things too. The versions of yourself you tried to be and couldn't sustain, the expectations you absorbed before you were old enough to question whether they actually belonged to you. The image of how your life was supposed to look by now, the grief of the unlived life that sits quietly underneath the managed surface of the life you are actually living. You have been holding all of that, with remarkable faithfulness, and the holding has cost you something that you may not have fully counted yet. Tonight we are going to begin, slowly and gently, to put some of it down. Number 5. What you are actually holding when you cannot let go. When people talk about not being able to let go, they almost always mean a specific person, a relationship that ended, someone who left or was lost or simply drifted away. And yes, that kind of letting go is real, and it matters, and we will get to it. But Jung understood that the difficulty of letting go almost always goes deeper than the specific person or situation that seems to be the object of the holding. What you are holding underneath the person, underneath the situation, is almost always something more interior than that. A belief, an image, a version of yourself that the person or the situation made possible, or an unfinished emotional story that has not yet been allowed to reach its ending. When you cannot let go of someone, you are rarely only holding the person. You are holding the version of yourself that existed in relation to them, the you that was capable of that particular kind of love, the you that was chosen by them, or needed by them, or seen by them in a specific way. You are holding the feeling of being wanted, of being relevant, of mattering to someone in the particular way that this specific connection made mattering feel. And when the connection ends, it is not only the person you lose, it is access to that version of yourself, that particular quality of aliveness. And the holding on is very often the psyche's attempt to preserve access to what felt real, what felt alive, what felt like the most genuine version of the self in the context of that connection. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Karen. She had been trying to let go of a relationship for 3 years, not a recent relationship, one that had ended 3 years ago and that she had thought about, in one form or another, almost every single day since. She had done everything the conventional wisdom suggests. She had talked about it in therapy. She had journaled about it. She had told herself she deserved better. She had unfollowed him on social media. She had been on dates. None of it had worked. Not in the way that she needed it to work. Not in the deep interior place where the holding was actually happening. When she began doing genuine interior work, she discovered something that surprised her. She was not holding him. Not exactly. She was holding the version of herself that had existed during that relationship. A version that had felt more alive, more present, more genuinely herself than anything she had managed to access before or since. When she was with him, she had been funnier than she usually let herself be. More direct, more willing to take up space, more comfortable in her own skin. And when the relationship ended, she had not only lost him, she had lost access to that version of herself. And what she had been trying to hold on to for 3 years was not the person but the aliveness. The particular quality of being genuinely present that she had somehow been able to access in his company, but that she had no idea how to access on her own. Jung wrote, "The most important question anyone can ask is, what myth am I living?" And the myth Karen had been living was this, that her most alive self was only available in the context of that specific connection, that the aliveness belonged to him rather than to her, that without the relationship, she would return to the slightly diminished, slightly managed, slightly less real version of herself that she had been before it, and so she could not let go. Because letting go felt like agreeing to go back to being less than she had been, less alive, less present, less genuinely herself. The real work for Karen was not learning to let go of him. It was learning to access the aliveness directly, to understand that what she had been able to feel in his company was hers, had always been hers. He had simply been the context in which she had first allowed herself to feel it. And once she understood that, once she began the work of accessing that aliveness through the interior rather than through the exterior of another person's company, the holding began to release. Not because she stopped caring about what had been lost, but because she no longer needed to hold the connection in order to hold the self that the connection had made available. This is what genuine letting go actually requires. Not the suppression of feeling, not the performance of being over something, not the convincing yourself that it was not as significant as it felt, but the interior work of understanding what you were actually holding, what the connection was providing that you have not yet learned to provide for yourself, and then, slowly, beginning to develop that capacity. To access the aliveness, the presence, the particular quality of being genuinely real, directly, through the interior, through the relationship with yourself, through the work of genuine self-love that makes it possible, for the first time, to hold yourself in the way you have been reaching for other people to hold you. If you are holding something right now that you have been trying to let go of and cannot, leave a comment below. It does not have to explain itself. It does not have to be fully understood. Just a word or a feeling or an acknowledgement that something is being held, because sometimes The first step toward letting go is simply the honest recognition that the holding is happening, and that is enough. That is already something real. The people inside the inner circle started exactly where you are tonight, tired of the patterns, tired of giving too much, ready to come home to themselves. What changed for them was not one video. It was showing up daily for the interior work. That is what is waiting for you inside. The link is in the description. Number 6. The grief you have not let yourself feel. One of the most important things Jung understood about human psychological life is something that our culture actively works against. The understanding that grief is not a problem to be solved. It is a process to be lived, a necessary, irreplaceable, profoundly human process that has its own timing and its own requirements, and that cannot be rushed or managed or converted into something more comfortable without a significant cost to the interior. When you lose something that mattered, whether it is a person or a relationship or a version of your life that you believed was going to unfold in a particular way, the appropriate response is grief. Full, honest, sometimes overwhelming grief. The kind that moves through you rather than being managed by you. The kind that does not need to be understood or justified or wrapped in a lesson about why it was all for the best. Just the grief itself. The honest acknowledgement that something real has been lost and that the losing of it matters. Most people do not allow themselves this, not fully. They allow a version of it, a controlled, time-limited, socially appropriate version that keeps the grief within bounds that feel manageable. They give themselves permission to be sad for a while, and then they expect themselves to move on. And when the moving on does not happen on schedule, when the grief keeps returning or refusing to fully lift, they treat it as evidence of something wrong with them, a weakness, an inability to heal, a failure of the moving on that was supposed to have happened by now. But the grief that keeps returning, the kind that does not resolve according to any schedule, is almost always unfinished grief. Grief that was not allowed to complete itself. That was cut short by the pressure to be fine, to be strong, to move on, to not be so affected by something that other people seem to handle without the same level of difficulty. And unfinished grief does not go away. It waits, in the interior, in the shadow, and it keeps returning, in different forms and at different moments, until it is finally allowed to complete the process it was trying to complete all along. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Lynn. She had lost her mother 4 years before she came to this work, and from the outside, she had handled it beautifully. She had managed the practical things that needed managing. She had supported her siblings. She had returned to her life and her work and her relationships within what everyone considered a reasonable time. She had, by all external measures, grieved and moved on. But underneath the moving on, the grief had not completed itself. It had been interrupted too early by the pressure to be strong, to be the one who held things together, to not fall apart when everyone else needed her to be steady. And so it had gone into the shadow, where it had been living for 4 years, influencing her in ways she did not fully recognize. A chronic heaviness that had no clear cause, a difficulty accessing genuine joy, a sense that she was moving through her days at a slight distance from the full feeling of being alive. When she finally allowed herself to actually grieve, not in the managed way but in the full and ungoverned way that grief actually requires, what happened was not what she had been afraid of. She had been afraid that if she opened the grief fully, it would overwhelm her, that she would not be able to function, that the feeling would be too large to survive. But what happened instead was something closer to the opposite. The grief, when it was finally allowed to move through her rather than being held back by her, felt not like drowning but like something releasing. Something that had been compressed for too long finally having enough space. And in the space that the completing of the grief created, something else became available. A quality of presence that had not been accessible while the unfinished grief was taking up all the interior room. A capacity for genuine joy that had been blocked not by the loss itself, but by the uncompleted grief of the loss. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And what he meant by this, in the context of grief, is that the attempt to avoid the pain of genuine loss is always more costly than the pain itself. The grief that is not allowed to complete its process does not spare you from suffering. It simply converts the suffering into something more chronic, more diffuse, more interior, the ache that has no clear cause. The flatness that follows even your best moments, the sense that something is always just slightly missing. These are the symptoms of unfinished grief. Of the loss that was not fully acknowledged, because the acknowledgement felt too dangerous, too overwhelming, too much to ask of a person who was already holding so much. Tonight, as you rest here in the quiet, I want to give you permission to feel whatever is unfinished, not to force anything, not to manufacture emotion, or perform grief, or produce any particular feeling, but simply to allow what is actually present in the interior to be present. Whatever is held there, whatever has been waiting, whatever grief, however old, has not yet been allowed to complete its process. You are allowed to feel it, fully, without needing it to be proportionate or appropriate or finished by any particular time. You are allowed to grieve what you lost and what you never had, and the version of your life that did not unfold the way you believed it would. All of it, without editing, without managing, without the pressure to be already over it. That is not weakness. That is the most honest and courageous thing a human being can do, to feel what is real, to let the interior be as it actually is rather than as it is supposed to be. And in that honesty, in that willingness to let the grief be as large as it actually is, something begins to move, something that has been waiting to move for a very long time. The beginning of the genuine completion, the real letting go, not the performance of it, but the thing itself. Number 7, letting go of who you were supposed to become. There is a particular kind of grief that most people never quite identify as grief because it does not have a clear object. It is not the grief of losing a specific person or a specific relationship. It is something more diffuse and more pervasive, and in many ways more difficult to acknowledge because it requires admitting something that feels uncomfortably close to failure. It is the grief of the unlived life, of the version of yourself that was supposed to exist by now and does not, the career that was going to be different, the relationship that was going to look different, the person you were going to become when you finally figured out what you were supposed to be doing, the life that was somehow always just ahead of where you actually were. Most people carry this grief without recognizing it as grief. They experience it as dissatisfaction, as the persistent, low-level sense that they are somehow behind, that everyone else seems to have figured out something they have missed, that the life they are actually living is somehow not quite the life they were supposed to be living. And they spend enormous amounts of energy trying to close the gap between the life they have and the life they were supposed to have, through achievement, through self-improvement, through the constant updating of goals and timelines and images of what a good enough life is supposed to look like, never quite arriving, never quite closing the gap, never quite finding the point at which the actual life measures up to the imagined one. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Beth. She was 51 when she first allowed herself to acknowledge this grief directly. She had spent most of her adult life in pursuit of a version of herself that kept moving just ahead of wherever she managed to get. Every achievement, every milestone, every moment that was supposed to feel like arrival produced a brief sense of relief, followed by the return of the familiar feeling that the real thing was still somewhere ahead. She was not depressed exactly, not dissatisfied with specific things exactly, just perpetually oriented toward a future self that never quite arrived, perpetually reaching for something that kept receding. When she finally stopped, when she allowed herself to simply be where she actually was, rather than perpetually measuring the distance between where she was and where she was supposed to be, something very simple, and very unexpected happened. She realized that the version of herself she had been reaching for, the one who was supposed to be further along, more together, more clearly arrived, was not something that existed ahead of her. It was something she had constructed from other people's images of what a successful life looked like, from the expectations of her family, from the collective standards of her culture, from the accumulated pressure of a lifetime of measuring herself against benchmarks that had never actually come from her own interior. The image she had been chasing was not hers, and the grief of not having reached it was not actually grief for something she had lost. It was grief for something she had never wanted in the first place but had spent decades pretending she did. The real grief, the grief underneath the grief, was for all the years that had been spent in pursuit of that external image rather than in genuine contact with her own interior, with what she actually wanted, what actually mattered, what the genuine self, not the performing self, was actually reaching for. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And the waking that Jung was describing is exactly what happened for Beth in that moment of stopping. The recognition that the life she had been chasing was a dream, a construction, an external image that had been mistaken for an internal truth, and that the life she was actually living, with all its incompleteness and its divergence from the supposed timeline, and its genuine and specific and completely unrepeatable qualities, was the real thing, was hers, and was enough. Letting go of the supposed version of yourself is one of the most liberating and most grief-filled things a human being can do, because it requires mourning something real, the years that were spent in the chase, the energy that went into the performance of becoming the supposed version, the parts of the actual self that were set aside to make room for the pursuit of the imagined one. All of that is real loss, and it deserves real grief. But on the other side of that grief, something becomes available that was never available during the chase, the actual life, the genuine self, the specific and irreplaceable and completely sufficient reality of who you actually are, not who you were supposed to become, who you already are, right now, in this moment, in this body, in this life, exactly as it is. And that, Jung believed, is the beginning of the real thing, the thing that all the chasing was always trying to find. If you feel the weight of the unlived life, the gap between who you are and who you were supposed to be by now, leave a word in the comments. Just one word that names what it feels like to be where you are rather than where you were supposed to be. Because naming it is always the beginning of being able to put it down. And putting it down, even a little, even just for tonight, is the beginning of something that changes everything. Number 8. How the body holds what the mind refuses to feel. As your breathing continues to slow, as the weight of the day settles more completely into the surface beneath you, I want to bring your attention to something that Jung understood long before modern science had the language to confirm it. The body is not simply the vehicle the mind rides in. It is an intelligence in its own right. A form of knowing that operates below the level of conscious thought and that registers, with extraordinary precision, what the mind has not yet been willing to acknowledge. The tension in the shoulders that appeared years ago and never quite left, the tightness in the chest that arrives without a clear cause, the heaviness in the stomach before certain conversations or certain situations. These are not random physical events. They are the body's record of what has been held, what has been suppressed, what has been waiting in the interior for a quality of attention that would finally allow it to move. When you learn to listen to the body in this way, it becomes one of the most reliable guides to what is actually happening in the interior, beneath the surface of the managed life, before the mind has processed something. Before the words are available, the body already knows. It has already registered the grief that is unfinished, the anger that was suppressed, the need that was hidden, the genuine feeling that the persona converted into something more acceptable. All of it is held in the body, in the specific places where the holding lives. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Jess. She had been in therapy for 2 years and had made genuine progress. She could talk about her patterns with clarity. She could articulate the wound. She could trace the connections between her early experiences and her adult behaviors with precision. But there was one thing that all the talking had not quite reached. A physical sensation in her chest that appeared at certain moments, in certain conversations, in certain situations, and that she had never been able to fully explain or resolve through the thinking. A tightness, a heaviness, something that was not quite pain, but that was also not quite not pain. Something that had been there for so long that she had almost stopped noticing it. When she finally began to work with the body directly, when she turned her attention toward the sensation rather than away from it, and allowed herself to simply be with it without immediately trying to analyze or understand or resolve it, something happened that she had not expected. The sensation began to speak, not in words, but in images, in feelings, in a quality of knowing that arrived not through the thinking mind but through the body itself. What it communicated, held in that tightness in the chest, was grief, old grief. The grief of a younger version of her who had needed something she had not received and who had learned, very early, that the needing was inconvenient and the grief was too much, and the safest thing was to make it quiet and keep it there. When Jess allowed herself to feel that grief, fully and without the management, the tightness began to ease, not all at once, not permanently, but enough that she could feel the difference. Enough that the space where the tightness had been holding began to feel, for the first time in memory, like space, like room, like the possibility of something other than the holding. Jung believed that psychological transformation must be embodied to be real, that insight alone, however profound, is not sufficient, that the knowing must reach the body, must move through the nervous system, must be felt as well as understood, and the body, which has been faithful in its holding of everything the mind has refused to feel, is always ready for this. It has been waiting, with the same patience that the shadow has been waiting, with the same faithfulness that the genuine self has been waiting, for the quality of attention that says, I know you are here. I am not going to rush you. I am not going to manage you into something more comfortable. I am going to be here with you for as long as it takes, until what has been held can finally, gently, begin to release. So as you rest here tonight, as your body grows heavier and the thoughts grow softer and the world outside this moment grows quieter, bring your attention to the body, not to analyze, not to fix, just to feel. Is there a place that is holding something? A tension, a weight, a tightness that has been there so long you have almost stopped noticing it. Let your attention rest there, gently, without demand. Simply present with what is there. And if something begins to move, if something begins to surface or soften or release, let it. You do not need to understand it. You do not need to know what it is or where it came from or what it means. You only need to let it be here, in the attention, in the warmth of being seen, in the gentle, extraordinary mercy of finally being allowed to exist exactly as it is. That is the beginning of the body's healing, and the body's healing is always the beginning of everything else. Feel yourself sinking even deeper now. The heaviness in your limbs, the softening behind your eyes, the way the thoughts are beginning to lose their edges, becoming less sharp, less insistent, more like clouds passing through a sky that is gradually growing still. You don't have to hold any of this in your mind. You don't have to remember where we are or what comes next. Your unconscious is absorbing everything it needs. Your soul is doing the work that words can only point toward. All you need to do is stay here, in the quiet, in the dark, in the extraordinary, ordinary peace of a body that is finally being allowed to rest. And as you rest, I want to take you somewhere. Not a dramatic place, not a place that requires any effort to reach, just a little deeper into the interior. into the territory that lies beneath all the things we have been exploring tonight, beneath the giving too much, and the holding on and the grief, and the body's long, faithful record of everything the mind refused to feel. Beneath all of that, there is something else, something quieter, something that has been present through all of it, not suffering, not wounded, not trying to manage or perform or get anything right, just present, just real, just waiting, with the most extraordinary patience, for the rest of it to finally go, still enough that it can be heard. Jung called this the self, the deepest center of the psyche, the part that exists beneath the ego and the persona and the shadow, the part that was there before any of the shaping began, and that remains unchanged and undiminished through all the years of the shaping. And tonight, in this quiet, we are getting closer to it than you may have been in a very long time. Number 9. The moment you stop trusting yourself. There is a moment, somewhere in the history of every person who struggles with self-love, when they stopped trusting themselves, not in a dramatic way, not in a single clear event that can be pointed to directly, but in the accumulation of smaller moments, the moments when they reached inward for guidance and found that the guidance they received was not reliable, when they felt something strongly and acted on it, and the action was met with disapproval or ridicule or the withdrawal of love, when they trusted their own perception of a situation and were told, by someone whose opinion mattered enormously, that their perception was wrong, when they said what was true for them and were made to feel that the truth they were carrying was somehow too much, too strange, too inconvenient for the room. Over enough of these moments, a particular conclusion forms in the interior, not consciously, not as a decision, but as a felt sense that gradually hardens into something closer to a conviction. My own inner knowing is not reliable. The signals I receive from my own interior cannot be trusted. When I feel something strongly, I should check it against what other people feel before I act on it. When I perceive something clearly, I should verify it with someone else's perception before I allow myself to believe it. My own interior is not a trustworthy guide to my own life, and from that conclusion, the reaching outward begins. The constant checking, the seeking of validation before moving, the inability to make decisions without an extended consultation with other people's opinions. The way other people's responses become the primary source of information about whether you are okay, whether you are right, whether you are heading in the right direction, not because you are weak, because you learned, in a very specific context, that your own interior was not a reliable navigator, and so you outsource the navigation to other people, to external validation, to the reactions and opinions and responses of the world around you, and called it being considerate, being thoughtful, being the kind of person who values other people's input. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Dana. She was someone who described herself as deeply indecisive. She could not choose a restaurant without polling everyone at the table. She could not make a professional decision without extended consultation with at least 3 people whose judgment she trusted more than her own. She could not end a relationship, even one she knew was wrong, without waiting for the other person to confirm through their behavior that it was indeed wrong. She was not stupid. She was not incapable of thought. She was someone who had learned, very early and very thoroughly, that her own interior knowing was not trustworthy, and so she had spent decades looking outward for what could only ever come from within. When she began tracing this pattern backward, she found its roots in a very ordinary kind of experience. A mother who had frequently invalidated her emotional perceptions, not cruelly, not deliberately, but consistently. When Dana felt hurt, her mother would explain why she should not feel hurt. When Dana felt afraid, her mother would tell her there was nothing to be afraid of. When Dana felt excited about something, her mother would offer measured perspective on why the excitement might be premature. The message was never explicitly stated, but it accumulated over years of these interactions, into something very clear. What you feel is not reliable information. What I know about the situation is more accurate than what you feel about it. And so Dana stopped trusting what she felt, stopped treating her own interior as a valid source of information about her own life, and started looking outward toward the perceptions and judgments of others for the guidance she no longer believed she could find within. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." And the waking that Dana needed was precisely the waking of trust. The gradual, careful, profoundly important process of learning to trust her own interior again, not blindly, not without the capacity for reflection and growth and the willingness to be wrong, but genuinely. In the way that a person trusts a compass they have learned to read, not because the compass is infallible, but because it is calibrated to something real, something true, something that the external world, however well-intentioned, can never quite access the way the interior can. The rebuilding of self-trust is one of the most quietly revolutionary acts a person can undertake, because it changes the entire orientation of the life, from outside in to inside out, from the constant checking of other people's reactions to the quieter but more reliable checking of the interior. From the exhausting project of monitoring how you are landing to the simpler and more honest project of feeling what you are actually feeling and allowing that feeling to be information, real information, about you, about your life, about what is right for you and what is not, about what you actually need rather than what you are supposed to need. If there was a moment or a series of moments when you stopped trusting yourself, when the message arrived that your inner knowing was not reliable, leave a word in the comments below. One word that represents what it felt like to have that trust taken from you. Because naming the moment, even now, even decades later, is always the beginning of finding your way back to the trust that was never actually lost, only buried, only covered, only waiting for you to remember that it was there. Number 10. What it means to come home to yourself. The phrase coming home to yourself is one that people use often, without quite knowing what they mean by it. It sounds beautiful. It sounds like something worth reaching for. But what does it actually mean? What is the felt experience of it? How do you know, if you are there, that you have arrived? And if you are not there yet, what is the direction of travel? What are the small and ordinary moments in which the coming home is actually happening? Jung spent his entire career pointing toward this, toward the experience he called individuation, the process of becoming genuinely, fully, irreducibly yourself. And he was always careful to say that individuation is not a destination. It is a direction, a continuous, lifelong, never quite finished process of moving more genuinely into the reality of who you actually are. Moving away from the performed version, away from the managed version, away from the version that was shaped by fear and approval and the accumulated pressures of a life lived primarily in response to other people's needs and expectations, and moving toward the original self, the specific and irreplaceable and completely sufficient reality of who you were before any of the shaping began. Coming home to yourself feels different from what most people expect it to feel like. It is not a dramatic arrival. It is not the resolution of everything difficult or the permanent achievement of peace or happiness or any particular emotional state. It is something quieter and stranger and more ordinary than any of those things. It is the experience of being genuinely present in your own life, of the self that is moving through the moment, being the real self rather than the managed version, of the gap between the surface and the depth being slightly smaller than it was yesterday, of the hollow feeling being, for a moment, absent, not because everything outside has become better, but because something inside is more genuinely inhabited. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Claire. She had been doing this work for 2 years, not perfectly, not consistently, with many lapses and many returns and many moments of recognizing that the old patterns had reasserted themselves and having to begin again from wherever she had landed. But with enough genuine effort and enough honest attention that something had shifted, something real. She described it not as a single moment of arrival, but as the gradual accumulation of small moments in which she noticed that she was more genuinely herself than she had been before. A conversation in which she said what was actually true rather than what would be most acceptable. A moment of solitude in which the quiet felt inhabited rather than empty. A decision made from genuine desire rather than from fear of what would happen if she chose differently. She said that the experience of coming home to herself was nothing like she had imagined it would be. She had expected something more dramatic, something that would feel clearly like a transformation. What she found instead was something that felt more like recognition, like turning a corner and finding yourself in a place you had been before but had forgotten. Not a new place, a remembered place. The interior that had always been there, that had always been genuinely hers, that had simply been covered by so many years of the persona and the performing and the careful management of herself that she had forgotten it was there. And finding it again felt not like achievement, but like return, like coming home after a very long time away. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And the word he chose, privilege, is worth holding. Not task, not obligation, not achievement. Privilege, as in something rare and worth being grateful for. Something that not everyone finds their way to. The opportunity, available to every human being who is willing to turn inward with enough honesty and enough patience and enough genuine care for the self that has been waiting there. To spend this one life actually being who they are. Not performing it, not managing it, not presenting an acceptable version of it to whoever happens to be in the room, but genuinely, quietly, in the ordinary moments of ordinary days, being it. That is what coming home feels like. Not fireworks, not resolution, just the particular quality of being genuinely present in your own interior, of the real self being the one who is here, and of that being, simply and without drama, enough. If you have ever had a moment, however brief, of feeling genuinely at home in yourself, leave a comment below, a memory of it, a feeling, a single word that captures what it was like. Because those moments matter more than we usually acknowledge. They are the proof that the home exists, that it has always existed, that the direction of travel toward it is real, and that the arriving, however incremental and however ordinary, is always possible. Number 11. The relationship that begins when the reaching stops. Here is the paradox that Jung kept returning to, in different forms and different languages, throughout the entire body of his work. The more genuinely you come home to yourself, the more genuinely you can be present to others. The deeper the relationship you develop with your own interior, the deeper the relationships you become capable of having with the people around you. The more you are able to love yourself in the real sense, not the affirmation sense, but the genuine presence sense. The more you are able to love others in a way that is genuinely free, that does not require anything from them in order to remain available, that does not need their response in order to continue, that does not collapse when the response changes, because it was never dependent on the response to begin with. Most people believe the opposite. They believe that the more you focus on yourself, the less you have for others. That self-love is somehow in tension with love for others. That the energy and attention given to the interior journey comes at the expense of the connections that make life meaningful. But Jung understood that this is precisely backwards. You cannot give from what you do not have. You cannot offer genuine presence to another person if you have never learned to be genuinely present to yourself. You cannot love freely if you are always reaching, always needing the other person to provide something that only the interior can actually provide, and the relationships that are built on that reaching, however warm and however caring they appear on the surface, always carry underneath them the particular fragility of something that depends entirely on the other person's continued provision of what the self has not yet learned to provide for itself. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Amy. She had spent most of her adult life in relationships that she described as intense and consuming and ultimately exhausting. Every relationship had required enormous amounts of energy, the monitoring of the other person's responses, the management of her own behavior to maintain the connection, the constant low-level anxiety about whether she was enough, whether she was wanted, whether the connection was as solid as it appeared. She was not in bad relationships exactly. She was simply always reaching in them, always oriented toward what the other person could provide, always slightly dependent on their responses for her own sense of whether she was okay. When she began doing the interior work, when she began the slow and unglamorous process of developing a genuine relationship with her own interior, something changed in the quality of her relationships that she had not anticipated. She became, for the first time, genuinely available for real contact. Not the contact between her need and their response, the contact between her genuine self and their genuine self. Because for the first time, her genuine self was present enough to be met. She was no longer reaching toward them for something that the interior had finally begun to provide, and in that freedom from the reaching, something became possible that had never quite been possible before. The simple, extraordinary experience of being genuinely with another person, without the agenda of the need, without the monitoring of the response, without the anxiety about whether the connection was secure. Just present, just real, just two people, genuinely encountering each other in the space that opens when neither of them is primarily reaching. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And real transformation in relationship, the kind that reaches both people at the level of who they actually are, rather than who they have been performing themselves to be, is only possible when both people are genuinely present, not reaching, not performing, not needing the other person to provide what the interior has not yet learned to provide for itself, just present, in the full and unedited reality of who they actually are. And that presence, in another person and in yourself simultaneously, is one of the most extraordinary experiences available to a human being. Not because it resolves anything, but because it is real, because it reaches the depth where the loneliness actually lives. And in that reaching, something changes that no amount of reaching outward was ever able to change. The relationship that becomes possible when the reaching stops is not a perfect relationship. It is not a relationship without difficulty or without the ordinary friction of two real people encountering each other honestly over time. But it is a real relationship, grounded in genuine presence, capable of genuine meeting, and built not on the managed performance of two people trying to be enough for each other, but on the quiet, extraordinary, completely sufficient reality of two people who have come home to themselves and who are, from that home, choosing each other, not because they need each other to be complete, but because the choosing, from that place of genuine completeness, is its own kind of love, the freest kind. The kind that does not clutch or demand or collapse when the other person is simply and ordinarily human. The kind that Jung believed was the natural expression of a self that has done enough of the work to finally be genuinely, freely, unconditionally present. If you feel you are ready for this kind of relationship, with yourself first, and from that, with others, leave a word in the comments, just one word. Because sometimes, one word is the beginning of the most important conversation of your life, the one you have finally decided to have with yourself. Let your body grow even heavier now, even more completely surrendered to whatever is beneath you. Feel the way the surface holds you. The way it has been holding you all this time without asking anything from you in return, without requiring you to be useful or interesting or worthy of the holding, simply holding you. The way the earth holds everything, without condition, without judgment, without ever withdrawing. And as your body rests in that holding, let something in the interior begin to soften as well. The grip that the thinking mind maintains even in rest. The low-level vigilance that has become so habitual it no longer feels like vigilance at all. Just the way things are. Just the background hum of a self that has learned, over many years, that it cannot quite afford to fully let down its guard. Tonight, you can let it down. Just here. Just for now. There is nothing that needs guarding in this moment. Nothing that requires managing or monitoring or presenting in a particular way. You are simply here. In the quiet, in the dark, letting Jung's wisdom continue to move through the layers of the unconscious that words alone cannot reach. And what we are moving into now is the territory that sits at the heart of everything we have been exploring tonight. The actual experience of letting go, not the concept of it, not the aspiration toward it. The real thing, what it actually requires, what it actually feels like, and what becomes available in the space it opens. Number 12. Why letting go is not the same as giving up. The most common misunderstanding about letting go is that it means not caring, that it is a form of indifference, a withdrawal of investment, a decision to stop mattering about what matters. And because it is understood this way, most people resist it, because they do not want to stop caring, because the caring, however painful, feels like the last genuine connection to what was lost. And if they let go of the caring, they are afraid they will let go of the connection itself, of the love itself, of the evidence that it was real and that it mattered. But this is not what letting go means, not in Jung's understanding, and not in the honest experience of people who have genuinely done it. Letting go does not mean not caring. It means releasing the grip, the specific, effortful, energy-consuming act of holding something in the interior so tightly that it cannot move, cannot complete its natural process, cannot reach the resolution that grief and loss and change always eventually reach if they are allowed to move through rather than being held in place. Think about what it actually feels like in the body to hold something. The tension in the hands, the contraction in the chest. The way holding requires a continuous expenditure of energy that is not available for anything else. The way you can feel the holding as a physical effort, even when you are not consciously aware of it. That is what most people are doing with the things they cannot let go of, holding them in the interior, with an effort that is rarely acknowledged as effort because it has been going on for so long that it feels like simply existing. And letting go is the release of that grip, the opening of the hands, the allowing of what has been held to find its own weight, its own direction, its own natural place in the interior rather than the place the holding has been forcing it to remain. It is not indifference. It is release. And the difference between indifference and release is the difference between not caring and caring enough to stop trying to control what cannot be controlled. Caring enough to trust that what was real does not need to be held in place to remain real, that the love does not need to be gripped to remain love, that the loss does not need to be maintained in its acute form to remain acknowledged, that things can be real and released simultaneously, that letting go and loving are not opposites. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Sarah. She had been holding the grief of a friendship that ended badly for almost 5 years. Not an intimate relationship exactly, but a friendship that had mattered deeply and that had ended in a way that left things unfinished, unresolved, words that were never said, apologies that never came. A particular kind of closure that the friendship never provided. And in the absence of that closure, Sarah had kept the friendship alive in the interior, going over the conversations, reimagining the ending, constructing the version of events in which things were said differently and the ending was different, and she was able to leave it with the sense of resolution that the actual ending had not provided. She had not been doing this consciously. It was happening in the background, the way the interior processing of unfinished things always happens in the background, but it was using an enormous amount of energy. Energy that was not available for the actual relationships and the actual life that were present. and when she finally brought it into the light. When she finally acknowledged, honestly and without the justification, that she had been holding this for 5 years and that the holding was costing her something real, the first thing she felt was not relief. It was grief. The grief of the friendship as it actually was, not the revised version, the real version, with all its limitations and its failure to provide what she had needed and its genuine ending in the way that it had actually ended. And when she allowed herself to feel that grief fully, without the holding and the revising and the imagining of a different ending, something shifted. The grip began to release. Not because the loss became smaller, because it became real, because it was finally allowed to be exactly what it was, rather than what the holding was trying to make it. And in becoming real, in being seen clearly and honestly and without the distortion of the grip, it found its natural place, in the past, where it belonged. And from that natural place, it no longer required the energy of the holding to maintain. It simply was a real loss, a real friendship, a real ending. And real things, when they are allowed to be real, do not need to be held in place. They simply exist, in their proper weight, in their proper proportion, in the interior, without the grip, without the cost. Jung wrote, "What you resist not only persists, but grows in size." And the holding, the resistance to the natural movement of grief and loss through the interior, is always what keeps the thing alive in its acute and unresolved form. Letting go, the release of the resistance, is always what allows it to complete its natural process, to move through, to find its place, to become, not smaller, but properly proportioned, real but no longer consuming, present but no longer gripping. If you are holding something with a grip that is costing you more than you have fully acknowledged, leave a comment below, just a word, an acknowledgement. Because the first step toward releasing the grip is always the honest recognition that the grip is there. And that recognition, however uncomfortable, is always an act of genuine self-love. Number 13. The things we hold that were never ours to carry. There is a particular category of holding that is worth naming directly because it is so common and so rarely recognized for what it is. The holding of things that were never yours to carry in the first place. The emotional weight of other people's lives that you absorbed before you were old enough to understand that it was not your weight to absorb. The expectations that were placed on you before you had the capacity to question whether they fit. The grief and the anxiety and the unresolved interior material of the people who raised you that became part of your interior landscape, not because you chose it, but because children absorb what is in the atmosphere of the houses they grow up in, before they have any way to filter it, before they have any understanding of where their interior ends and someone else's begins. Many people spend their entire adult lives carrying weight that was never theirs, living out emotional patterns that originated not in their own experience, but in the unresolved interior lives of their parents and grandparents. Experiencing anxiety that is not entirely their own. Feeling responsible for things that are not genuinely their responsibility. Orienting their lives around the management of other people's emotional states in a way that was learned so early and practiced so thoroughly that it no longer feels like something they are doing. It just feels like who they are. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Karen. She was the eldest of 4 children in a family where her mother struggled with depression that was never acknowledged or treated. Karen had learned, before she was 10 years old, to read her mother's emotional state with extraordinary precision. To know, the moment her mother entered a room, what the atmosphere was going to be. And to adjust herself accordingly. To become, in whatever way was required, the thing that might keep the atmosphere from becoming dangerous. To be helpful when helpfulness was what the atmosphere required. To be invisible when invisibility was what it required. To manage her own emotional expression with a care that was extraordinary in a child of that age. To take up exactly the right amount of space, never too much, never too little. Always calibrated to what the room could hold. As an adult, Karen was someone everyone described as deeply empathetic. She could always feel what was happening for other people. She was always the first to notice when someone was struggling. Always the first to offer support. Always the one who showed up. It was, by all external measures, a remarkable quality. But in the interior, it was exhausting in a way she could not fully explain. Because what looked like empathy was partly something else. It was the hypervigilance of the child who learned to read emotional atmospheres as a survival mechanism, who learned that her own emotional safety depended on her accurate reading of other people's states and her successful management of them. And that mechanism, however useful it had been in the original context, was still running in every relationship she entered, still scanning, still calibrating, still taking up exactly the right amount of space, still carrying a weight that was not entirely her own. The work for Karen was not to stop caring about other people. She cared genuinely, and her care was real. The work was to separate what was genuinely hers from what she had absorbed, to distinguish between the care that came from her own interior and the management that came from the old survival mechanism. And in that distinguishing, to begin, very slowly, to put down what was never hers to carry, not all at once, not without grief. Because the putting down of what has been carried for a very long time is always accompanied by its own grief. The grief of all the years that were spent under the weight of it. The grief of the child who was asked to carry something that was too heavy for a child. The grief of the self that organized itself around the carrying rather than around the genuine interior life that was always there underneath it. Jung believed that one of the most important aspects of individuation is the differentiation of what is genuinely yours from what you have absorbed from the collective, from the family, from the culture, from the emotional atmosphere of the early rooms. And in that differentiation, the gradual, patient, sometimes painful process of returning what is not yours to its source, not with blame, not with the assignment of fault, but with the simple, honest recognition that you have been carrying something that does not belong to you, and that you are now, with as much care as you can bring to it, putting it down. If you recognize the weight of something you have been carrying that was never originally yours, leave a word in the comments below. One word that names what it feels like to have been the one who carried it. Because naming it is the beginning of understanding it, and understanding it is the beginning of being able, for the first time, to put it gently down. Number 14. When you finally stop explaining yourself. There is a very specific moment in the journey toward genuine self-love and genuine letting go that most people recognize when they reach it, even if they do not have the language for it beforehand. The moment when you stop explaining yourself, not in the defensive sense, not in the sense of refusing to communicate or withdrawing from genuine exchange, but in the deeper sense, the moment when the need to justify your interior to other people, to make your feelings make sense to them, to translate your experience into a form that will be acceptable and understandable and approved of by the people around you, begins to release. For most people who have spent their lives in the pattern of giving too much and receiving too little, a huge portion of their energy has been going into this explaining, into the ongoing project of making the interior comprehensible and acceptable to other people, of translating the genuine feeling into the acceptable version, of converting the real response into something that will not make anyone uncomfortable, of justifying the need before expressing it, of prefacing the boundary with so much explanation and context and reassurance that the boundary itself is almost lost in the surrounding of it. The moment you stop doing this is not a moment of becoming selfish or cold or indifferent to how other people receive you. It is a moment of recognizing that the genuine interior does not require justification, that what you feel does not need to be made acceptable before it is allowed to exist, that your experience of your own life is valid precisely because it is your experience, not because it has been verified and approved by someone else's understanding of it. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Beth. She was someone who had always been extraordinarily articulate about her own experience. She could explain everything, every feeling, every decision, every choice she made that diverged even slightly from what other people seemed to expect. She had developed, over decades of practice, an extraordinary skill at translating her interior into forms that other people could receive without discomfort. She was, as she described it, fluent in other people's comfort. She always knew exactly how to frame what was real for her in a way that would not make anyone feel challenged or threatened or required to respond with something they did not know how to give. And one day, in the middle of a conversation in which she was doing exactly this, translating a genuine feeling into an acceptable form, she stopped, not dramatically, not with any announcement. She simply stopped in the middle of the explaining and felt the weight of all the explaining she had ever done, all the years of translation, all the energy that had gone into making the interior comprehensible to other people before it was allowed to simply be what it was. And she thought, quietly and with a clarity that surprised her, "I don't have to do this. This is not a requirement. This is a choice I have been making for so long that it stopped feeling like a choice." From that moment, something began to change. Not the relationships, exactly. The relationships mostly adapted, in their various ways, to the presence of someone who was slightly more willing to let her interior exist without full explanation. But the interior itself changed. The energy that had been going into the explaining became available for something else. For the simple, direct, unglamorous, and completely sufficient experience of being genuinely present in her own life. Without the translation, without the management, without the continuous effort of making herself acceptable enough to be allowed to simply exist. Jung wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." And what this means, in the context of stopping the explaining, is that your interior does not need to fit anyone else's understanding of what an interior should look like. Your feelings do not need to make sense to someone else in order to be valid. Your experience does not need to be translated into an acceptable form in order to deserve to exist. It is enough that it is real, that it is yours, that it belongs specifically and irreplaceably to the particular human being that you are. And that human being, in all their complexity and their genuine and unedited reality, does not require justification in order to deserve to take up space. That is not arrogance, it is self-love, the real kind, the kind that does not need to explain itself to be allowed to exist, the kind that simply, quietly, without drama or announcement, knows that it is enough, that you are enough, that the genuine interior, however inconvenient or complicated or not easily translated into someone else's comfort, is worth attending to, worth protecting, worth the small, daily, revolutionary act of letting it be exactly what it is, without the continuous effort of making it something more acceptable. If you have spent years explaining yourself when all you needed was to simply be yourself, leave a comment below, just a word, just the acknowledgement of the explaining. Because sometimes recognizing the weight of something is the beginning of putting it down, and the weight of a lifetime of explaining yourself is one of the heaviest things a person can carry, and one of the most liberating things they can put down. If something shifted in you tonight, and you want to keep that shift alive, the inner circle is where that happens. Daily prompts, deep meditations, a private community of people finally choosing themselves. Members are waking up differently, feeling things they stopped believing they could feel, coming home to themselves one day at a time. The door is open. The link is in the description. Come when you are ready. Number 15. The quiet that waits on the other side of letting go. There is something that waits on the other side of letting go that most people do not expect because they have been too focused on what they are releasing to imagine what might arrive in its place. Something that is not dramatic, not loud, Not the resolution they had been hoping for, or the healing they had imagined, or the clarity they had been reaching for all this time. Something quieter than any of those things. Something that arrives not as an arrival exactly, but as an absence. The absence of the grip, the absence of the holding. The absence of the continuous, effortful, energy-consuming project of maintaining what the interior has been maintaining for so long. And in that absence, in that unusual and slightly unfamiliar spaciousness of the interior that is no longer entirely occupied by the holding, something else begins to be perceptible. The real self. The original nature. The self that was always there, underneath the grief, and the performance, and the explaining, and the carrying of weight that was never quite yours. Present, intact, unchanged by everything it has been through, still genuinely, specifically, completely itself. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Lynn. She described the experience of reaching this place not as a triumph, but as a surprise. She had expected letting go to feel like loss, like the completion of an ending, like arriving at a place that was defined primarily by what was no longer there. But what she found was different from that. What she found, in the quiet on the other side of the letting go, was not absence, it was presence, her own presence, more available than it had been in years, more genuine than she had expected. Quieter than the intensity of the holding had allowed her to feel, but real, unmistakably, completely real. She said it felt like coming home to a house she had been away from for a very long time. Not a new house, not a better house, the original one, the one that had always been hers. The one that had been there through all the years of the holding and the managing and the explaining and the carrying of weight that was not hers. It had simply been inaccessible, covered over by everything else. But not gone, never gone, just waiting, with the extraordinary patience of something that has nowhere else to be, for the moment when the rest of it finally went quiet enough that it could be felt again. Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And the awakening Lynn experienced on the other side of the letting go was exactly this, the waking up of the interior that had been waiting. The coming home to the self that had always been present, but that all the holding had made inaccessible. And in that homecoming, however quiet and however ordinary, something became available that no amount of holding or managing or explaining or carrying could ever have produced. The simple, extraordinary, completely sufficient experience of being genuinely present in her own interior, of the real self being the one who was home, and of that, simply and without any further justification, being enough. That quiet is waiting for you too, on the other side of whatever you are holding. It has always been waiting. And tonight, in this dark, in this rest, in the slow and unglamorous and genuinely important work of allowing the interior to be exactly what it is, you are moving toward it, step by step, breath by breath, in the way that all real things happen, quietly, from the inside, in the direction that has always been home. And now let your breathing deepen even more. Feel yourself sinking further into rest. You've traveled through so much tonight, through the psychology of giving too much and feeling empty, through the mask you wore to survive and what it cost you, through the parts of yourself that went into the shadow and why they matter, through what self-love actually is and what it is not, through the things you have been holding that were never quite yours to carry, through the grief you have not yet allowed to complete itself, and through the quiet that waits on the other side of the letting go. But there's something else waiting beneath all of that, something quieter yet, perhaps even more powerful, because even when you begin to love yourself, even when you start to release what has been held for too long, there's still one final thing waiting to reveal itself. Not a task, not another layer of work, but a recognition, a remembering, the sense, arriving sometimes suddenly and sometimes so gradually you almost miss it, that you have been here before, that the self you are returning to is not a new self, It is the original one, and it has been waiting for you, with more patience and more faithfulness than you can quite comprehend, for exactly as long as it has taken you to find your way back. Jung called this the Great Return, the moment when the journey of individuation, which always moves outward and into the world first before it turns inward toward the genuine self, begins to feel less like becoming something and more like remembering something, less like arrival and more like recognition. The recognition of a self that was always already whole, always already sufficient, always already home. And the extraordinary paradox at the heart of everything Jung ever wrote is this: the self you have been working so hard to become is the self you have always already been. The journey was never toward something new. It was always toward something original, something that was covered over but never lost, something that has been waiting in the interior through all of it for exactly this moment. Number 16. The awakening that was already happening. Have you ever noticed that the moments of genuine change in your life rarely announce themselves clearly in advance? They do not arrive with the fanfare that their significance deserves. They do not come when you are ready, when you have done enough work, when you have resolved enough of the interior material to be sufficiently prepared. They come quietly, in the middle of ordinary days, in moments that do not look, from the outside, like anything particularly significant. A conversation that shifts something you had not known was waiting to be shifted. A piece of writing that finds a place in you that nothing else had reached. A moment of solitude that is simply quiet enough that something real can finally be heard. And what you are experiencing right now, tonight, in this listening, is one of those moments. You may not feel it dramatically. You may not recognize it as the significant thing it is until later, until some ordinary moment in the days ahead when you notice that something is different, that a pattern has shifted slightly, that a feeling is more available than it was before, that the real self is a little more present in an ordinary interaction than it usually manages to be. But the shift is happening beneath the words, in the layers of the unconscious that words can only point toward, in the body that has been listening as closely as the thinking mind, in the interior that is always more ready for this than the performing self believes. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Amy. She had been trying to change for years, not dramatically. She was not someone who believed in grand gestures or dramatic declarations of transformation. But consistently, and with genuine effort, she had been working at the interior, attending to the patterns, bringing the shadow into the light, practicing the small, daily acts of staying with herself, rather than immediately reaching for something more comfortable. And for a long time it had felt slow, sometimes imperceptibly slow, sometimes like nothing was happening at all. And then, one ordinary morning, sitting in her kitchen before the day had begun, before any of the roles had been put on and any of the managing had started, she felt something she had not expected. Not a dramatic shift, not a revelation, just a quality of presence that was different from what had been there before. A sense of being genuinely in the room rather than slightly observing herself being in the room. A quality of contact with her own ordinary morning that was more direct than anything she could remember feeling in a very long time. She was simply there, in her own kitchen, in her own body, in her own specific and unrepeatable life, and it was, without any external thing having changed, enough, unmistakably, quietly, completely enough. She said later that what struck her most was how ordinary it was, how undramatic, how entirely unlike what she had imagined transformation would feel like. There was no before and after. No moment she could point to and say that is when it changed. Just the gradual, quiet, almost invisible accumulation of all the small moments of staying with herself, finally reaching a kind of tipping point, where the interior had shifted enough that the presence was more available than the performance, where the real self had reclaimed enough ground that it was the one who was sitting in the kitchen that morning, rather than the managed version. Jung once wrote a sentence that has stayed with me as one of the most important things he ever said. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And what strikes me every time I return to it is the word privilege, not task, not obligation. Not the responsible thing to do for the sake of your psychological health or your relationships or the people who depend on you. Privilege, as in something rare, something worth being grateful for, something that not everyone finds their way to. The opportunity, available to every human being who is willing to turn inward with enough honesty and enough patience and enough genuine care for the self that has been waiting there, to spend this one life actually being who they are. And Amy, in that ordinary kitchen, on that ordinary morning, was finally, quietly, experiencing that privilege, not because she had completed the work, but because she had done enough of it that the genuine self had found enough room to be genuinely present, and that presence, however quiet and however brief, was the evidence that the awakening was not something that was going to happen. It was something that had already begun. If you feel, even as a faint vibration, that something in you is already beginning to shift, leave a comment below, not to announce it, just to acknowledge it. Because sometimes the most important thing about a change that is happening is simply to recognize that it is happening, and that recognition, however quiet, is the beginning of allowing it to continue. Number 17. What becomes available when you come home? When you have been away from home for a long time, you forget certain things. Not completely, not in a way that erases them, but in a way that makes them inaccessible. The particular quality of the light in the rooms you grew up in, the specific smell of the place that was safe, the way the body felt in the environment that was genuinely yours rather than the one you were performing yourself into fitting. You forget these things, not because they were not real, but because the distance from them, maintained long enough, makes them harder to access. Harder to feel as present and available, rather than as memories of something that was once true. Coming home to yourself, the genuine return that this entire journey has been pointing toward, is the remembering of these things, the re-access to what the distance made inaccessible, to the genuine interior, to the real self, to the specific and irreplaceable and completely sufficient reality of who you actually are beneath all the years of the performing and the managing and the careful presentation of an acceptable version. And what becomes available when you come home is not something new, it is something original, something that was there before any of the shaping began, and that has been waiting, with the extraordinary faithfulness of something that has nowhere else to go, for you to find your way back. What becomes available, specifically, is this: the capacity for genuine joy, not the performed enjoyment of things that are supposed to be enjoyable, but the direct, unmediated, completely honest experience of genuine aliveness in the presence of something that actually moves you. The capacity to be fully inside a good moment, rather than slightly observing it from a managed distance. The capacity to feel what you actually feel, rather than the acceptable version of what you feel. The capacity to receive what is genuinely offered, rather than only what the pattern has been able to recognize as love. The capacity to be known rather than simply approved of, to be met rather than simply appreciated, to be present rather than perpetually performing. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Dana. She was someone who had spent years reaching for joy without quite managing to arrive inside it. She could produce the behaviors of enjoyment. She could laugh at the right moments and express enthusiasm at the appropriate times and present herself as someone who was having a good life. But the actual experience of genuine joy, the direct felt sense of aliveness and presence and genuine engagement with what was happening, had been largely unavailable to her for longer than she could clearly remember. It was one of the subtler costs of the performing self, that even the joy had to be managed, had to be filtered through the persona before it could be expressed. And in that filtering, something essential was lost: the directness of it, the full-bodied immediacy of actually feeling something good, rather than presenting the acceptable version of feeling something good. When she came home to herself, when the genuine self began to be more present in the ordinary moments of her daily life. The first thing she noticed was not the resolution of anything difficult. It was the return of genuine joy. Small things. The particular quality of morning light that she had somehow stopped actually seeing, even though she had been looking at it every day for years. The taste of food eaten without distraction for the first time in as long as she could remember. A moment of genuine laughter that came from somewhere real, rather than from the persona's repertoire of appropriate responses. These were not dramatic experiences. They were completely ordinary, but they felt, from the inside, like arriving somewhere she had been trying to get to for years, like coming home, in the most literal and the most interior sense of that word. Jung wrote, "One cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. For that which was great in the morning will be little at evening, and what in the morning was true will at evening have become a lie." And what this means, in the context of coming home to yourself, is that the self that was shaped by the requirements of the morning of life, by the necessity of building the persona and establishing a place in the world, is not the self that the second half of life is asking for. The afternoon of life asks for something different, something more genuine, something closer to the original nature, something that the persona was always covering over in service of survival and adaptation, and the legitimate requirements of living in the world. And the coming home is the recognition that the covering over has served its purpose, and that the time has come, gently and without drama, and without the abandonment of everything that has been built, to let the genuine self have a little more room, a little more air, a little more of the ordinary light of ordinary days. If something in these words is touching a recognition of what has been missing, of the joy or the presence or the genuine contact with your own life that has been largely unavailable, leave a word in the comments. Because that recognition is not nothing. It is the beginning of the return. And the return, however quiet and however gradual, always leads home. Number 18. Your comeback is not coming, it is already here. And now, as you drift even closer to sleep, I want to say something directly that I want you to carry into whatever rest follows these words. Something that Jung understood, and that most people spend their entire lives waiting to feel from the outside, rather than recognizing from the inside. Your comeback is not something that is going to happen to you. It is not waiting for the right circumstances, or the right relationship, or the resolution of the right interior material, or the achievement of some sufficient level of healing. It is not ahead of you, it is already here. Already happening. In the small and ordinary and completely real shifts that have been occurring in your interior throughout this entire listening. Every moment tonight that you stayed with something difficult, rather than immediately reaching for something more comfortable, was a moment of the comeback. Every honest acknowledgement of what has been held, every recognition of a pattern that has been running, every small permission given to the genuine self to be present rather than the managed version, every breath that went a little deeper than the breath before it. All of it. Already the comeback, already the return, already the coming home that you may have been waiting for, as if it were something that had not yet begun. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Lauren. She had spent 3 years wondering when things were going to shift, when the interior work was going to produce something visible, when the gradual, unglamorous, largely invisible process of attending to the interior was going to result in something she could recognize as transformation. And then one day, in the middle of an ordinary conversation with an ordinary friend about nothing particularly significant, she realized that she was completely present, not performing her presence, not monitoring her responses, not managing the interaction toward any particular outcome, just there, in the conversation, in the moment, in her own specific and genuine and completely unedited way of being in the world. And she thought, with a quality of recognition that was both simple and profound, this is it. This is what I was reaching for. Not in some imagined future state. Here, in this ordinary conversation, in this ordinary afternoon, in this life exactly as it actually is. The transformation was not ahead of her. It had been accumulating quietly in all the small moments of staying with herself, of being honest, of choosing the genuine response over the acceptable one, of attending to the interior with the consistency of someone who understood that the real changes happen in the small moments rather than the grand ones. And it had reached, in this ordinary conversation, on this ordinary afternoon, a quality of presence that she recognized as genuinely different from what had been there before. Not perfect, not complete, but real, unmistakably, quietly, completely real. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And the complement of that sentence, the thing Jung was always pointing toward with that warning, is this: when you do make the unconscious conscious, when you do bring the genuine self into the light of genuine awareness, your life stops feeling like something that is happening to you. It starts feeling like something you are genuinely living, from the inside, from the real self rather than the performing self, in the actual present moment rather than the managed version of it. And that feeling, however quiet and however ordinary, is the most extraordinary thing available to a human being. It is the privilege Jung was pointing toward, the privilege of actually being yourself. In your own life, in your own interior, in the specific and irreplaceable and completely sufficient reality of who you actually are. You are already here. The comeback is already happening. In the quiet of this listening, in the willingness to stay with what is real, in the breath that is slowing now as sleep approaches, in the body that is releasing the last of what it was holding, in the interior that is, even now, continuing to do the work that words can only point toward. You are already coming home. You have been coming home all night, and the home you are coming toward is not somewhere you have never been. It is somewhere you have always been, underneath everything, through everything, waiting for you with the patience and the faithfulness of something that knows, with a certainty that the thinking mind can never quite match, that you are always going to find your way back. Before you rest, I want to tell you about a space where this journey continues, every single day, not as content to consume, but as a practice to inhabit. The inner circle is where the people who felt something shift tonight come to keep the shift alive, to go deeper than any single video can take them. Every morning, a new prompt that goes directly into the territory we have been moving through tonight. Extended meditations for the long, quiet hours, the full Shadow Work podcast, the Inner Work Archive, where every question that matters lives and waits to be sat with. A community of people doing exactly what you have been doing tonight. Not alone in the dark, but together. Real people doing real work. People who understand what it means to stay with something difficult, instead of immediately reaching for something more comfortable. People who are serious about the privilege Jung was describing. The privilege of actually becoming who you truly are. The door is in the description. It has always been open. And if something in tonight has touched a place that you do not want to close again when these words end, that is exactly the place the inner circle was built for. Come when you are ready, the work will be waiting. And so will the people who understand why it matters. Now let it all settle. Every word, every recognition, every small shift in the interior that happened tonight, in the quiet below, the level of conscious awareness. Let it settle into the deepest layers of you, where Jung believed all true transformation takes root. You don't need to remember any of this. Your unconscious has already absorbed what it needed. The seeds have been planted and they will grow in their own time. In the moments you are not watching for them. In the ordinary mornings that will be slightly different from the ordinary mornings before. In the conversations where something real comes through that the performing self would previously have managed into something more acceptable. In the quiet moments of genuine presence that will begin to accumulate, quietly, from the inside. In the direction that has always been home. Jung said that who you are meant to become is not ahead of you. It has been waiting inside you all along, and tonight you have taken another step toward meeting that self. Not a dramatic step. Not a step the world will see or recognize or applaud. A quiet interior step, the kind Jung trusted most, the kind that does not announce itself but that changes everything, slowly, from the inside, in the direction of home. Rest well, fellow Jungian. The love you were searching for was never as far away as it seemed. It was here, in the interior, in the genuine self, in the quiet that has been waiting underneath all of it. For exactly as long as it has taken you to be still enough to feel it, you are home. Sleep now. I will meet you in the next video.